Welcome to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy, where we hear from top educators, entrepreneurs, and creative thinkers on how to design your future. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. We have the full leadership team here. I'm Domenico Randazzo, my cousin, Dr. Anthony Longo, and we have our Chief Strategy Officer, Lincoln Farquharson, and our CEO, Garth Birch. And today we're going to have a discussion about parenting. But just before that, we're going to have Anthony give us a brief overview of our organization and how it all ties together.
So our organization, Real World Academy, works with students at all transitions, all the way from high school until the workforce, which is unique. Many college prep organizations are simply SAT prep courses, and they do nothing to continue working with the student to make sure that they actually succeed. Real World Academy lets any high school student or parent hire an agent, which is a customized counselor and life coach. Real World Academy gives students the extra time that the traditional counseling experience in high school does not. And today we're joined with as our guest, Garth Birch, who's the CEO of Real World Academy, and we're just going to dive right into it. So Garth, first of all, you have a unique background in how you ended up in the education sphere. So how did you end up as the CEO of an education nonprofit?
Thanks, Anthony. To be honest, it really came about by accident through my son, who was entering college for the first time. And, I had no idea, given the fact that, I'd been to college sometime a while ago, how things had changed. And after having seen what he wanted to do and needed to do, he was actually interested in being a musical theater major. Mm-hmm. So there's certain unique aspects along with that. But on top of everything that's required for the college application process now, it's a lot. It's a lot. And parents don't necessarily have as much time as they used to because they're managing so many different things. And, I wanted to help him obviously get into the best school that he could. And, we took it on together, and I saw how much was actually required of the students and of these kids. And I just didn't think that, quite honestly, he had access to the same kinds of resources that a lot of other kids had. We hired a coach, a college prep coach. She was excellent, but she was $300 an hour. And I really thought that, we were fortunate in that we had the resources to be able to afford somebody like that to help us just organize the process, but not everybody does. And, as college becomes much, much, much more, expensive, I wanted to make sure that all of these kids have the same kind of access to resources and can end up in the schools that they are happy with choosing, as well as successful in the end. And, it just became a passion of mine.
And $300 is just blows me away with that kind of cost for an hour for the current offerings that they have in the college sphere. And besides price, what other challenges did you face as a parent of somebody applying in this new millennial modern age into college?
Well, it ends up being a lot about organization and understanding what is needed. The interesting thing is that a lot of kids and students are at different places as they enter this year, this all important year that so many people put so much focus on. And, some students are first generation students, only the first ones to actually not only graduate from high school, but actually even think about going on into college. Some have aunts and uncles that have gone through the process and are getting additional pressure from there. Some are, more organized, some are less organized. They all have different ways of approaching this process. And certainly with COVID, that has taken things to another level, just in terms of a level of uncertainty. So at the end of the day, and then let me just say also that just like you have students at different points in the spectrum and different skills and so on, you also have parents as well, right? Back in the day, it used to be that the parents were, had a lot of time to help, children get into school and so on and so forth. We're working more and more and more hours during the day, and we don't have the time, and the process has changed so much that we don't have the time to understand all of the different aspects to it. In a lot of ways, I liken it to almost like the tax code, trying to understand what goes into it, and it still remains somewhat nebulous in terms of what actually determines how a child actually gets into the school of their choice, or the school that is hopefully determined by someone else other than the child themselves. So, with all of that thrown into a mush of experiences, trying to sort it through and simplify it is really what Real World Academy is. And I'll just say this last point is that there's a lot of other organizations, as you mentioned in your opening, that do some aspect of this work. Real World Academy is the only one that actually takes it all on, from the standpoint of college prep, in terms of going through and answering the various forms and applications, as well as interviewing, as well as resume writing. And we actually encompass a ton of different skills for those students that actually want to go on to college, but also those that may not necessarily feel that college is the right fit. And so we help them as well determine what is really their life path, what is really their career goals, and we help them access those aspects.
I mean, we're the one-stop shop.
Yep.
And what Garth isn't mentioning is that his background is originally in pharmaceutical, and he took it upon himself to get his son into college and take on this behemoth that was the college exception monster as it is, but also to try to help others. So I think that's really important. But you were going to say something.
Yeah, and I think even beyond that, Real World Academy teaches a number of vital lessons and skills and strengths that people need, such as knowing who you are, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, knowing what you like and what you don't like. These are questions that are ignored by, a large percentage of my generation. And just because
I would argue everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I've spoken to people in their 40s and 50s, and I asked them, if I could wave a magic wand and make you anything in the world, would that be? And they stumbled through that question, because to be honest, no one's ever asked them that question. Mm-hmm. So if you've never been asked that question, you don't even know to ask yourself that question.
Right. And I think it's so crazy. Like, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on the education food chain, everyone at a certain point needs outside help to navigate the college application process. Why is that? If we are in school for 6-8 hours a day, and that is the main, way for students to show evolution in their academic and professional careers, why is there such a gap of information? Why does that exist?
And I'm sorry, I was just going to say one other quick point to that point. We all know and can feel organically that there is this gap, right? And without disparaging the institutional way of approaching this from the standpoint of, yes, and the people that are in these students' lives in terms of who to go to for help. There are the parents. There are also the guidance counselors that are in these schools. I will just call to your attention just one statistic. The average guidance counselor spends anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes per student talking about the college application process. And you may say, oh my God, that's so little amount of time, but also recognize that the guidance counselors unfortunately have over 200 students that they are trying to help through this process, along with all of their other regular duties. So it's a lot to ask of everyone. And, what we're trying to do and kind of where I saw this need and this gap that needed to be filled was really in serving as a supplement or as a another tool for the guidance counselors, for the parents, for the students, everyone to take advantage of, so that at the end of the day, the students end up being the ones that benefit from the most. So
right, 15 minutes for 4 years is just, mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's not fair to anyone. I think that's Garth's point. It's not fair to the students. It's not fair to the counselors. It's a disproportionate amount of things that need to get taken care of. And it's just an unfortunate situation. And I feel like, unfortunately, just coming out of college myself, even when students have those experiences being coached in terms of getting into the college they want, or so they think they want at the time, once that acceptance letter arrives, the relationship ends. And there's no ongoing mentorship and guidance, throughout the student's college career. And so that's another gap that we've tried to fill.
And how do we know how the student did ultimately? You helped the student get into engineering school. What if he hated engineering, or what if he ended up going to a school and he ended up transferring after a year because it didn't have the offerings that he had wanted? Now, to some degree, you can't predict that, but how do you know? How do you adjust that in the future for feedback? Organizations don't do that. The current organizations do not do that. It's a transaction. We get you into college, or we help get you into college, and we will try to push whatever agenda you or your parents want you to do for your career goals, but it ends there. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And it's tough. I mean, overall, again, being in total fairness and objective about it, it's one of the easiest metrics to measure is college attainment, right? So we could say 100 students left me to go on to 100 different colleges. I can't really measure how many went into the workforce per se. I could say that they graduated and then got a job, but then I have to look at what kind of job it is. Some people may have worked at Burger King, where other people may work for Goldman Sachs, right? Then I have to say, how long were they staying at the job? 6 months? And then what was the reason that they even got the job? Was it because of something I did, or was it something somebody knew? Someone knew them. So it's, when you get into workforce tracking, it's a little difficult to do without being built around that mechanism, built around that idea. So a high school isn't built for workforce development. So a workforce development organization would kind of spend more time tracking that aspect of it. So what is the ultimate goal for a public school system? A public school system is to get you into, nowadays, is getting you into post-secondary credentials or a degree of some sort. So they're not really looking at getting you a job. So their lens of which they measure is going to be based on how many students they can get to graduate. And that's really the first thing. They're really trying to get you to graduate. That's number one. So they're looking at how many students they can graduate. That's their first metric. Then they think about, how many are going to further education. But to track them outside past high school requires another level of funding, a level of support that most schools don't have or are not going to dedicate that kind of resource to. And it's an economic issue there. It's a political issue as well. But it's not necessarily fair for the guidance council to be asked to do that when they're only funded and supported to do graduation from high school and possibly, 6 months into your next step. But keep in mind, 6 months after you graduate high school does not necessarily mean that you're actually going to do something within that 6 months. If you wait until the next year to go to college, I don't know that unless you tell me. Just even from our perspective, to track students that leave our program, it's very difficult. To track students in the program is very difficult. If they're not responding back to you, if they don't come and tell you, we have to invest so much money in just the marketing, just the outreach and recruitment, and just to, have people cold call people all the time to figure out what's going on. I mean, it's a lot of resources that's needed to support any organization to go beyond what they're supposed to do. Initially founded to do. So high school is initially founded to work within the 4-year spectrum. Beyond that, it takes another set of resources that a lot of schools just don't have and won't be able to get. And then you have organizations that are just, none of them are really built around college per se. At least
SAT prep machines,
Yeah, I mean, but even SAT prep is only allows you to just do the SAT and that's it.
That's it.
I mean, some of them are getting you into college, but then that's because you're still considered a high school student, and therefore you can kind of fit in that little category there. But we're the only ones that really work with college students. But that's also because there's no funding for college students outside of the Pell Grants and all the college-based grants. But there's no funding to support a program to support students while in college.
That's a really
The
good
idea is
point.
that the college has those programs already there. So just being in the college, you should have access to that stuff. But that's not necessarily not necessarily fair to say, because not all colleges are the same. And so their level of help is going to vary from student to student. We see that even in our programs with students. Some students have supports and other students don't. Some colleges are easy to navigate, other colleges are not. I mean, you can't rest on just your college being there to support you too. And then colleges were not necessarily built to do this work, right? A college was not for people who couldn't afford and is not for people who did not have the mindset for college. So now our society has told everyone, you got to go to college. But there was no infrastructure to support any of that.
Yeah.
There's no infrastructure from the high school space, the home, the social space, the college space to support any of these new students who otherwise normally wouldn't have went to school. Now they go to school because we told them to, we forced them to, and there's no mechanism in place to support any of that.
My feeling is that the only metric that a lot of high schools are using is what is your college acceptance rate, and that is not a good number to be using.
And graduation rate.
And your graduation rate, but they're not. Neither is good metrics. Neither are good metrics to use because, sure, you put 80%, 90% of your students into college. That's great. 2 to 4 year colleges. That's great. But where did they go afterwards? We're looking at your generation, my generation, arguably the same generation, and most people are still in, even at the end of their 20s, entry-level jobs in the field that they want, or not in a job in the field that they want. So yeah, they got 80%, 90% got into college, but again, it wasn't. We're not using the data in the right way.
It's a cheap set of metrics, and it's self-serving. It serves the high school, and I don't mean to sound too cynical about it, but you can juice up your graduation rate and your college acceptance rate, no problem. Make your school look good and get more funding, but the student's well-being is left in the dust. There's not a formula that exists in the current public high school system that actually tracks student well-being. And I think that
it's hard to do.
It's hard to do for sure, but there's if we are culturally we are solely relying on 2 cheap metrics that only serve the institution, and that breaking that is step 1.
The other thing too is that as we look at again the marketplace of companies that are sort of doing this kind of work and sort of what's in it for the students. I've recently come across some additional information from my friends who work in the college arena and the admissions and so on and so forth. And across the board, they're seeing even some schools where their number one budget line item used to be the football team or the basketball team. Now those line items are actually being reduced, and the ones that's receiving that money is now the mental and well-being and health services because of the emotional trauma that a lot of these kids are going through, either while they're at school because they picked the wrong school, or they weren't prepared for it, or they didn't see it. And so they've had to invest in a lot of additional resources to help kids sort of manage that through their freshman year.
And it's no accident. I've seen this so many times. Like, you'll have a recent college graduate who has a terrible spout of depression because they were allowed to make a $250,000 investment when they were 18. And now they're 6 figures in debt, and there's no way out. And the next 2 decades are swallowed up by that.
That's right.
So it's not, people make fun of Gen Z as a bunch of, anxious, depressed kids, but it's like, sorry. It's not an accident,
right?
It's a broken system, and the student's well-being is left in the dust. Like I just said, these institutions create a self-serving, delusional model that leaves students behind.
And I sound like I'm always on like pushing back on certain things, but I guess because that's just my role as chief strategy officer to just evaluate both sides. You know, you got to evaluate the big things, the small things, and see all aspects of the situation. And not saying that anybody here is ever wrong, but we just need to, when we're educating people, I always like to put all the information on the table and let you decide what's right for you versus, versus what's for me. And nothing really has changed ever, to be quite honest. It's always been a high debt, high stakes arena, college. It's always been that way. Mm-hmm. Because newer people, a new economic bracket has now entered and realized that this is like crazy expensive. Now the conversation is really out there. But it's always been a place where only certain people can afford to go, has always been.
But it has gotten more and more expensive.
Well, it does get expensive, but here was the problem. And a lot of on the political aspect, this is why a lot of people in government are refusing to fund college, because college has always benefited no matter what. It doesn't matter how many people go to college. College has always found a way to get paid from it.
Like a casino, you're saying.
Yeah, college has never gone down in its spending. It's always continued to go up.
Yeah.
And the more money they say, and more times we as people say we need more government funding, that just opens the cash cow for more the colleges. The colleges are never hurt by less people or more people. They just adapt to it and they still continue to make more money. There's small colleges, more small, more elite colleges, those rates are high to even go to those schools. There's only 10,000 kids there or 5,000 kids there, you know what I'm saying? But they've survived for over 100 years and they've been charging this fee. Now you're opening up more colleges. Well, they say, okay, well, this is the cost that it costs to come here, right? $40,000. Mm-hmm. And so instead of you saying colleges come down on your tuition, you go to government and say, you need to help me pay for this tuition. So colleges are now say, okay.
You're getting paid by the government.
So now we're getting more money. Mm-hmm. So then you say, okay, now the institutions, now everyone's saying, well, you have to open up your doors to even more students. Well, in order to do that, I need to have more faculty, I have more resources. Now we have students coming in with deficiencies. Now we have to provide them. Now we go back to the government and say, no, government, you want me to help these people, you need to provide more resources. And then the people turn around and say, yes, you need to give these colleges more funding. So the colleges are never coming down on any of their spending. And instead they can easily go up first of all, they're always going to go up year after year anyway. Everything goes up year after year, but they can continue to go up without no restrictions. And so they've always been the winner in this debate on colleges and access. They've always been the winner. And so, even when you get on certain colleges about limiting access to certain groups, it doesn't hurt them because at the end of the day, most of them are private institutions anyway, and they've been around regardless if, Latinos can get in or not, right? So it's never been seen as a negative until the alumni say something of those colleges or students just refuse to attend those colleges. Mm-hmm. But so long as students want to go to college, as long as students fight for more funding, public funding for colleges will always win, and there's really no incentive built in to change their model.
And so, we talked about the money aspect from both on the parents as well, from getting private coaches and tutors paying money. We talked about the colleges getting more and more expensive and how the game is rigged in favor of the colleges. And you had talked about, Garth had talked about the lack of guidance and advisory for the parents in this process. Is there any other points that either of you, but especially Garth, that you want to make about as a parent that you went through during all of this? Any other specific challenges as a parent that you wish that you had guidance on that earlier, that you knew more about this field that we've all entered into, as people who had attended college and, may have children who are attending college?
Yeah. So a couple things, and in response to your point, Lincoln, which I completely agree with, one of the things that I think all parents need to understand, and quite frankly, students as well, is what is the purpose what is the value that you're placing on either going into college or not? Once you understand what you're hoping to get out of it in a very realistic conversation, I'll just share a personal story with myself in that my son, who I mentioned earlier, is going into musical theater. I was very clear with him that because I'm a business guy, right? So, but I was very clear with him, and he and I sat down and talked about the idea that he may actually not be on Broadway, which is his life's dream, or for a very long time. And that, what is he going to do? Is he okay with living in a hovel in the city as he's working towards going on auditions and doing all these other things, and maybe he can't pay his light bill and having 6 roommates, all of that, painting that realistic picture about what it may be like if he graduates and there's nothing there. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic that is occurring right now, this is a very realistic scenario for students that's happening this year. This is one of the reasons why schools like Northeastern or other schools that are now engaging with these co-op programs, it's very inviting, right? But at the end of the day, to Lincoln's point, the colleges aren't suffering by saying, oh, we're going to reduce your tuition or we're going to give you back money because we know that you may actually not end up with a job at the end of the year. So getting back to your question, it's really important that parents understand I'm investing this money I'm investing in my child, right? And the value or what I think I'll get out of it at the end is that I'll put my child on a path towards, number one, making sure they're happy, well-adjusted, and on a path to where they can, start living their lives once they achieve post-secondary life. The other thing that I want to just make sure that parents understand, and students as well, is that, yes, we've talked a lot about the finances and so on, but it's also really important that the students are comfortable and, God forbid, happy in the choice that they've made in which school. And one of the things that we've advocated from day one is that we will follow and stay in touch and be engaged with a student once they make their college of choice, make their selection for their college of choice, and follow them through their first semester so that we have a sense that they are well-adjusted, they're, happy with, how they're managing their time. We have courses that address those things like time management, organizational skills, some of the less academic issues. And even as they enter through college, we do training with those college students through another organization that's part of Real World Academy as well, in that just to make sure that they are going through their full 4 years and they never feel alone. I think that's really, really important.
And just, we not just the first 6 months, but we do it throughout the whole college continuum. So if they continue on with our services and the college institutes that we offer, the college institutes continue to track and monitor and support the students throughout their entire undergraduate career, which is beneficial because then we can provide mentorships throughout the 4 years. We can provide summer internships throughout the 4 years. And a lot of times the students don't really take the full advantage of those things still. So that's something else we got to make sure the parents understand, that there's a lot of opportunities out there, even outside of us, just basic opportunities that people just miss out on because they just don't know. They're just not aware. And so I'm glad that you brought those things up. But I'm curious, when you had the conversation with your son, did you tell him you can't come back here?
I did, actually.
Listen, when time gets tough, don't call me. Because time's going to be tough for me too. I ain't got it.
And the other thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because he has a brother, right? And many households have more than one, child going into college. And so how do you navigate, okay, I've now, moved on from this child and invested enough in this one, and there has to be some left over for the one or the two or the three coming behind him. Right. And that, part of what we do as parents and as familial members and support systems is we want to make sure that, the students have a realistic idea and are growing up, right? They are now becoming young adults, and part of this discussion is all, it goes into that level of their growth process. The other thing that I just wanted to mention just really quickly, and I don't want to make it all about stats and numbers and so on and so forth, but I will tell you that, again, in a conversation I've had with someone else, they paid $35,000 just for the prep program.
Wow.
Before the student actually entered into.
Whoa. Say that again.
$35,000. He was a CEO, I get it, but he paid $35,000 for the prep program to make sure that his child got into Harvard or Yale or a top 3 of the Ivy League programs.
Somebody's getting paid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do our packages cost again?
right, exactly. Nowhere near that.
And here's the problem with doing that is that if you didn't first figure out if your child even wants to go to college, right, you just threw money away. And so it's very important that we have these conversations with our students, with our children, and our students, depending on what side of the table you're on. But you have to have conversations with them to figure out, even if college is right for them. The whole world is putting peer pressure on everyone to go to college, right? And I mean, arguably, there's a lot of jobs you can't do without a college degree. I'm not denying that colleges, even if for those, I didn't want to go to college, and here I did 2 degrees. So
I didn't want to go either.
I had to get it because what I wanted to do. When I realized what I wanted to do, I realized I couldn't do it without a college degree. So therefore, I had to go. But if it was something else that I didn't need a college degree for, I wouldn't have done it. So, that's the questions that we have to ask our students, and we have to get to understanding what is it that you really want to do, what inspires you, what motivates you, what gets you up every day, and then you can figure out if you need to go to college in order to attain that, and understand that college is an option for you if you tend to choose later on in life that I thought that's what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a plumber, and I realized that's what it is. I really want to be an engineer, right? I thought that just working on the pipes was good, but now I want to design the pipes, right? Which is great because you went through a process to figure this out, right, and now you have clarity that it isn't just working on pipes and unclogging things I want to do. I want to build the structures around the pipes, and I only can do that if I have this type of certification or this type of credential. So now I can go to college with an understanding and a clear mind. So when time gets tough, I can fall back and say, why am I here again? Oh, that's why, right? And that's the motivation that keeps me going. And I speak from my own personal experience. There was times when I could not. I wanted to drop out of school so many times.
Sure, absolutely.
I was like, why am I here again?
Yeah.
This is not for me. That stats class really had me, boy, I was in tears sometimes, and sometimes I can't do this. I was really feeling like I couldn't do it. And,
Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And I was just saying to my friend who was taking a class with me, and we was working next to each other at the time. We was also work study. We were grad assistants. And we worked in the same office, and she was in the class with me, and she was like, no, we're going to do this together. I was like, I can't do this. She was like, no, I'm going to help you. So I managed to get through, thankfully, with her encouragement, and just, had to really ask myself again, why am I doing this? And when I remind myself, because, I always go back to I rode the bus. And anyone who lives in inner city, you got to do is ride the bus, especially if you want to work with human services. If you want to do any work in human services, whether that's education, health, whatever, dealing with people, all you got to do is be around them long enough, and you say, this is why I want to do something, because this is crazy. And I'm telling you, riding the bus, you will say, this is not right. I gotta do something about this, And not everyone feels that way, but that's how I felt when I rode the bus. I said, I felt bad for children who did not have the right upbringing. I felt bad for parents who felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to be the right parents. And I said, all they're missing is just some information and knowledge.
And $35,000.
$35,000.
Lying around.
And so, that's what made me go back to school, back into the classroom and say, okay, that's my motivation. Because I rode the bus was my motivation. So that's how I was able to get through, not just undergrad, but master's class too. It took me a while.
Yeah, and to that point, I will also say, even with you guys, where you have the opportunity to be entrepreneurs, go out and you don't necessarily, have to work for anybody right off the bat. But as you look at, how you're going to mold the rest of your career, or your lives, sometimes, yes, college gives you that credibility, right? You're not in sort of the tech world where you can create your own app and you don't necessarily have to have that, I graduated from X or Y school. But, you guys, in terms of managing your own careers, I'm sure you've had to feel as though, I need to go to school, and you've learned a bunch of really valuable things. How do I exist as a business, or, as a put up a shingle?
For sure. And you have to adopt the mindset, like, you're going to feel frustrated in school. A lot of the things you're doing on a day-to-day basis will not pertain to your, life after you graduate. But if you adopt the mindset that it's a means to an end, and I am going to extract the value out of this at any cost.
That's right.
But, we instill that mindset at Real World Academy with students by, creating that mental framework. But it goes back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago. That is not innate, and that is not instilled in students in the traditional kind of high school education model. So there's this existential dread that so many students have now because, I'm in school. Okay, I'm 200 grand in the hole. Apparently this is what I'm supposed to be doing because it's what my parents said. And it's just like there's such a lack of clarity amongst this generation. It's the effects of that are obvious.
And Garth has been dropping a lot of pearls in this talk so far, but one of the ones that he dropped that really, I was just thinking about this, was when you said that, the parents, to paraphrase it, the parents have no idea what their kid is getting into, and the parents are relatively not by their own intention, but they're misinformed. And what I mean by that is, I knew somebody who all he wanted to do was be an engineer, and his parents were like, my son's going to be an engineer, my son's going to be an engineer. And the kid clearly couldn't do it, couldn't cut it out, went to college and engineering school and all these things, and is just flunking and flunking and flunking at it. And
losing tons of money.
And losing a lot of money. And the parents are still like, he's going to be an engineer. And they're just so misinformed that, like, if they had just Google searched it, or had again, not saying that they're malicious and that they're just pushing him, and they know very well. They have no idea to even have asked somebody. Had they never spoken to a counselor or another engineer to say, well, is this even possible at this point, to keep doing it? And it just reminds me that the parents can be, again, enlisted as part of the problem and not even realizing that they're part of the problem, if that makes any sense, where it's just the parents are not educated about the fields. They don't realize, what does it take to be this? What does it take to be that? How many people that do this get a career in this? How many people that go to this college end up getting a career? How many people who go to college end up having depression and suicidal thoughts? They don't know anything about what we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, and do you blame them? I mean, we didn't know until we started getting into this.
Nobody educates them about this.
No one educates anyone. And that's part of the problem. I mean, even for you, Garth, as a parent, there was, you didn't know, right? Tell us about, like, when he was your oldest son was in high school, what steps did you put in place? Did you even know to start putting things in place?
No, we thought he was going to be a trumpet player. He'd been playing trumpet since he was 4 years old.
Okay.
And it wasn't until he decided that he wanted to do a career shift. Right. His mom passed away, and I was left trying to figure things out.
Right.
And this new world that now I was thrust into really left me feeling kind of overwhelmed.
What year in high school did this overwhelmed feeling happen?
This actually happened in the 10th grade.
Oh, okay.
So I had a year
in the thick of it, yeah.
Yeah, right as as we're heading into his most important year.
Right.
This is when we got hit with it, and not knowing where to turn was honestly the biggest issue. Is who do we even go to, right? Because the guidance counselors, like I said, unfortunately they just weren't as helpful as we would have liked.
Right.
There was almost people could say, oh, well, you just Google it, right? So there's a ton of information on the internet.
How do you filter that information?
How do you filter that information?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. How do you filter
What's
that?
right? What's wrong? How does one do it? And to this day,
how does it work for your son versus someone else's son? Right.
There's no one way to navigate it, right? But what can help is if you do have that partner who's been through the process a number of different times, have that experience. We all come from different backgrounds. I'm from pharmaceutical advertising. You're from medicine. You're from music and arts. You're from education. We have a ton of experience just in this room alone, let alone all our mentors and agents and facilitators who all come from different backgrounds. We can envelop and actually target and build out a customized program for the students themselves so that they feel as though I'm not in this alone. And we're not just, excuse the term, but blowing smoke. We actually have real life experiences to help the students navigate and help the parents navigate what is an already confusing process. I'll just give one other anecdote in that one of the other deciding factors that really made me so passionate about doing this, and I guess you can tell from my hand gestures and so on that I'm passionate. But it was junior year, and my eldest son came to me, who now had made the switch that he wanted to go into musical theater, and we're in the application process and so on and so forth. And he said, he and I tend to talk a lot about his friends and what's happening, which is great. So he told me that this girl that he had, it was a good friend of his. She had also applied to be a musical theater major at Montclair State. She got in. Now, anybody that knows about musical theater and the arts, quite frankly, it is a very rigorous and difficult process to go through because you have to do auditions, headshots. There's a number of different aspects that you have to implore, as well as, the usual application process. She went through all of that and got accepted. 3 weeks before move-in, her parents came to her and said, I'm sorry, honey, you can't go because we don't have the money to send you. So you have to go into the military like your cousin. And so here you clearly had a talented young girl who had gone through the whole process and their parents had navigated it. But because the parents and the students were not on the same page, either financially or what was really, the sacrifices that everybody was going to have to make in order to make this happen for the student, 3 weeks before the young girl was going to be off to school, she now had to do a complete shift in what her career, her life was going to be.
Oh my goodness.
Because the idea that she would go into the military and potentially come back to musical theater is not one that's really, is realistic. Wow. Those are the kind of stories that are so compelling that I'm like, oh my goodness, had we gotten to her earlier, then things might have been really different.
Wow.
So when you said you was going to do musical theater, what was your first thought?
Oh my God, are you kidding me? No, that's not going to happen.
So how many conversations did you have over, I shouldn't even know how many conversations, but I'm sure you had many conversations over the next 2 years at this point, because it's sophomore year. So we're talking about every dinner table conversation is, are we sure?
Well, so
when did you come to realize that, okay, this is really...
So here's the thing. I will say that I'm one of the kinds of parents, and the relationship that I have with my oldest son is that I'm very open. And so it is, I rarely ever say no. I say, okay, but. And the but is always, that's fine, and we can proceed. That'll be our primary focus. What's plan B, C, D, E, and F, quite frankly.
Right.
So the conversations that we had was like, okay, yeah, you want to go into musical theater. Do you know what it takes? What are you doing to make sure that happens? Right. And then, oh, by the way, if it doesn't happen, what is your backup plans to make sure that you can get to where you need to go?
And this is not a one-time conversation. This is
multiple.
Right. Over years. Over a couple of years.
As a matter of fact, actually, when he had was going through the actual college acceptance period now, where we were hearing the responses back, and he'd been rejected by a couple. Our first run of rejections was like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me just back up. when I stayed out of the process, much like we like to have parents stay out of the process and let the counselors do their thing and establish that relationship with the student. I stayed out of it, and then I like to do check-ins. So I just checked in once, and I said, "So what is his list look like?" And as everyone knows, the students put together a list of about 10 to 12 schools, and there's 3 categories, right? Safe schools, target schools, and your reach schools. And so, like was advised, he had that list of 3 categories. Little did I know, though, that his 3 lists, his 3 categories, consisted of all of the top musical theater programs. There were no safe schools. All of them were at reach. All of them essentially were reach programs. And so when we were getting rejections, I literally had an epiphany moment, like, are you kidding me? There's no way. What are we going to do? And he said, Dad, don't worry about it. I got this. Just trust that I've, managed the process. So I had a freak out moment, not going to lie.
Naturally.
But that's why it's important to be somewhat engaged. But you also have to trust your student, your child as well, and let them navigate, because this is part of that growth process I talked about a little earlier.
Okay, cool. So I'm just thinking when you had this conversation, the reason why I want you to speak on that is because sometimes we think that once you get an answer, the conversation is done. And the conversation isn't done, because young people, and just anybody, but definitely young people, don't really know. They're making it up as they go along, which we all are. But the difference is that as an adult, when you make it up as you go along, you've got to deal with the consequences of it. When your child's making it up as you go along, you got to deal with the consequences of it. Right? So you got to constantly ask them the same questions over and over again to force them to think about it over and over again. We come from our experiences, realize that we have to constantly think about something over and over again to make sure that we're on the right path. Granted, many adults still don't do that, but that's generally what we should be doing. Students, young people, come to a conclusion very quickly, and then they just execute, right? And mainly because consequence and responsibility doesn't totally fall on them. So they never really understand the gravity of a lot of decisions that they make. So therefore, they're quick to make decisions and don't have to think about anything other than that. But as an adult, you realize that your choices affect you, your children, your livelihood, your future. And so you tend to think about your decisions a little bit more. When we do have these conversations with our children over and over again, we're getting them to think in the same way. Think about it thoroughly. Ask yourself these questions over and over. Is this right for me? When you tried out something new, did you think about how to connect it to your profession, or your if he went to some sort of band camp or something, right? How does this now make you think about going into musical theater? If you're not asking those questions all the time, if you're not having this conversation all the time, you're not driving your kids crazy, essentially, about asking this, then they don't really think about it beyond just that one initial conversation. So it's good that you did have multiple conversations around the topic, because when the time comes and they're faced with a situation, they've kind of thought enough of it through where they're able to feel comfortable in a challenged moment, versus panicking because they weren't prepared.
Right. Yeah. The other thing, I'm glad you raised that point. The other thing I'll just say is that, and this is the difference between my older son now and my younger son, who's now going through the process, is that now my younger son is now involved in Real World Academy. And one of the things I was able to do with him is that we put our students through an assessment, right? We give them a series of 3 tests that help understand. So for parents that don't necessarily have as much of an open communication as they would like, or can't necessarily have those conversations with their child, these 3 tests, assessments, whatever you want to call them, help students and help parents understand their child better. It teaches them about their learning style. Do they really want someplace that's an urban school or a rural school? What's their personality type? It's almost like a Myers-Briggs type thing. But through those 3 assessments, it gives another window and another set of data to help the student and the parent understand their child better so that they can make more informed and better decisions about what's best for the student. So,
and what's even great is that your relationship with your son allows for that kind of conversation to happen. And that is the foundation of it all. If you don't have a real good relationship with your children, one, they're never going to be open and honest with you. Right? They're going to try to avoid all these different conversations with you and just ask you for your money and just, all right, just pay up because I took care of it. And you're not going to really know how to engage your child because you've never really been in the habit of engaging your children outside of parental, don't do this or do this. And so it's good to create, especially if you have young children. Now you have to really create a bond with your children so that they feel comfortable in having open, honest conversation with you and also feel being comfortable and being challenged by you too, where sometimes we challenge our children from a very parental lens and it comes down as more punitive than anything. But in your case, you're challenging them to think differently and you're questioning their decision and they know that you're questioning for great purpose, for a great reason versus you just trying to look for a flaw to attack me on, right? Which a lot of children feel is that their parents is looking for an opportunity to just tell them that they're not doing something right. And that creates a situation, especially for teenagers. I mean, teenagers already we're going to naturally be rebellious. We all want to do our own thing. We all want our sense of independence at 14, even though we can't even go to the store by ourselves. Right. So that natural inclination is there. And then when you top it on with some sort of punitive aura that you have already, they're kind of not going to be open to having a conversation that is to their benefit, to be quite honest. And so we have to really create an environment in our homes that allows for welcoming and open discussions for our children to have, because if we don't, we're going to find that a lot of children are ready to, which we find in Real World Academy especially, is that they go out of state, big time out of state, and they definitely go to college to get away from the parents.
Yep.
And
that's the only reason.
Right. They're trying to escape. What I mean?
Wow.
And it's crazy. Like, why are we, why are we at that point? Did you go to college to escape your parents?
No, I went to college half hour away from here.
That's true.
Why do students go to state schools when their state has a good state school? I should say. Why do students go to other states' state schools? Right. If they have the same offerings, the same majors, escape their parents, have a new set of friends, new set of
right.
life.
I mean, escape their communities. Some people just don't want to be in. It's funny because they'll say, I didn't want to be in Jersey anymore, but you've never really left this county. So you don't really know Jersey to say, I don't like Jersey, and we're speaking of Jersey because that's where we're based out of, but you never really left your hometown to really know more about your own state to really say, this is where you want to be.
Right.
And so a lot of times we just go off hearsay. I mean, why did you become a doctor? You know what I'm saying? Because you heard someone be a doctor? I mean, maybe not you, Anthony, but you talk to students who, I'm like, why did you choose that? You know no one in this field, right? You've never even been in a hospital outside of you just being sick. And yet you are absolutely confident you're going to be the next, OBGYN. You watch Grey's Anatomy. Is that how you came to this conclusion? So the same thing is going on out of state. You've never been to Delaware. You've never been to Maryland, but yet you picked all your schools in Maryland. Why would you do that?
And the other thing that I'll say to that point, and Domenico, you brought it up a little bit earlier as well, in that we've put so much pressure on this decision, and yet sometimes even if you just listen to the children, the students, they will help guide you. And therefore, the whole process becomes much easier and less stressful. It's a big decision. It's, $250,000 decision or so on, and they're making it 18. But, quite honestly, Gen Z gets tagged with, oh, they don't know, they're just a bunch of depressed, young kids, and we're going to put their future in their hands and they're going to mess it up and so on and so forth. Well, you know what? A lot of times they have a very simple answer and they can help guide us in how to motivate and navigate this process and just this life in general. And quite frankly, one last thing I'll just point into that is that I've been talking a lot about my oldest son and kind of the process that we went through. It was actually through him and his relationship with Domenico that actually we actually found our relationship and actually began the process of putting Real World Academy together.
How it all comes full circle.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, you are a parent who allows your kids to think for themselves. That's not always the case. So I agree that, Lincoln, you had mentioned, in many cases, students are impulsive with their decision-making and just do things and not recognize the consequence. But I think there's another problem that exists alongside that. Students have choice paralysis because they're so used to being told what to do, especially you have a certain type of parent and then maybe a certain type of professors, a series of professors. You have choice paralysis to the point where you graduate college and now it comes time to, oh, wait, I have to think for myself. I'm an actual human being who has power to make choices. That's a totally foreign concept to so many people. So Real World Academy, incentivizes students at a very young age to think for themselves, be honest with themselves, and know what they want so that they don't fall into that trap.
And just to be clear, we had spoken about being based out of Jersey, but we take students from any state. We can do, we have lots of virtual students. So think about it. Think about this investment in your student, in your child, that you might be paying a small upfront cost, but you're going to be potentially saving yourself and your child years, maybe decades of heartache and hundreds of thousands of dollars meant towards the wrong decision.
Just listen to your kid. Just allow them to speak and listen to what they have to say. So we're at an hour here. I think we're going to take a short break and then come back and talk some more about the origin story of Real World Academy. So thank you. Thank you for listening to the Keeping It Real podcast by Real World Academy. If you're a student looking for a mentor or a parent looking to help your kid design a happy life and a successful career, visit our website at realworldacademy.org and subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts to hear more exclusive content on how to design your future.